Oh, we're live.
We're live. I was waiting for the
Yeah,
countdown.
me too. I was like, let's get the beat going on and get pumped up, and then there's no countdown, and we're live.
It's actually a good intro. Like I kind of wanted to hear it too, not just from
Right?
a show flow perspective. All right. So how's it going, everyone? So Matt Topper here with Kyle Spooner. So we are filling in for Ray. How's everyone doing? Great to be here Friday. So this is going to be a different show. It might be quick because Kyle and I are just going through a few stories, but I think it'll be filled with advice, just like any other show. So how's it going, Kyle?
It's going great. I have decided I'm going to disagree with every point you make, regardless if it's right or not, so that we have some nice debate during the talk today.
That would make for an entertaining show, if nothing
Right?
else.
I disagree. Why? Reasons.
I like it. I like it. So we're gonna do the same thing. We picked a couple of stories out from the Reddit MSP. Kyle, I think we should start doing some interesting threads that come up like on Discord or Slack and say we
Ooh,
should talk
yeah.
about those too. Be a good
Yeah.
idea for next time.
Someone write that down.
All right. So, oh my God,
Ooh.
I need a microscope for this.
Oh, it's in white too. Oh,
Who used the old one? Old Reddit.
yeah. Old Reddit's the best Reddit. Let's be honest.
Yeah, it is. It is. All right. So the story is long ticket notes, and I read this before, so I'll summarize so you don't have to read the entire thing. This is from the perspective of a tech who I would say got in trouble, but got talked to that their ticket notes were very long, and like almost wrote a book in the tickets is what I'm surmising. Um, you ever run into that, Kyle? Do you have
Uh,
techs who do that, or do you have advice for someone who's hearing that?
so
Like it,
I like this. This is actually probably a really, really good point, um, because I've trained probably hundreds of technicians on how to work in a PSA and how to write notes and communicate with the client, right? Uh, and what this individual is doing, Mardo Lardo, needs to continue to be doing. Um, I would highly recommend that you continue writing your highly detailed notes, as long as it's not taking you hours to write them, right? It has to be
yeah.
concise enough to be uh, efficient, but still convey all your points. But, and here's the kicker, they should be for internal notes for any technician who may be reviewing your ticket or may have to look at it later, or is reviewing it from like a similar issue has occurred and they have found your ticket, and now you have a detailed explanation of what happened and how to solve it. The client information should be bullet points, a summarization of that long detailed information, just to explain, hey, look, this happened, this was the cause, this is it's been fixed, let me know if it happens again or there's any other issues, right? Short,
Yeah.
simple, concise to the client, long, detailed, informative to anyone else internally who's looking at the ticket.
Yeah, I agree. We always used to say that think of the client, and I'm referring to ConnectWise because we were a ConnectWise partner, but all PSAs have the concept of time entry and internal notes. Um, think of the time entry that you put in as this is your email you're writing to the client. And in most cases that's literally true as well, but also in the way that you should think of it. And then the internal only section is where you put, these are all the steps I followed. When it happened again, it was because of this weird issue at this customer. The customer, the client's not going to care about all those details, about all of that. I had to follow these 10 steps and here's the KB entry. And the other big point about this is don't trust that the internal notes are internal, right? I've definitely seen somebody like put, man, this client's such a jerk, or they're really annoying, and that ends up the client sees it somehow. Either like you screen shared or took a photo or something, or you put it in the wrong box. Like be very careful about what you put in those. That's not the place for it.
That's the second thing I say to new technicians I'm training. Act as if everything you put in the ticket a client will read. Uh, because it is entirely possible that they look over your shoulder, or you leave your computer unlocked at the client site. Or there's a number of scenarios where it could easily occur where someone can see your screen or see the notes that you've input. And feel free to put things like, I'm frustrated at this situation because I'm having trouble. Like eye language, as in you, the technician, never do anything related to the client. But yeah, that's the second thing I generally train on. There's been some issues with that.
Right. It's like never trust the mute button on phone calls, right?
Exactly.
It doesn't work.
It never works. There's some issues with that too. Good information. Always take your frustrations after you're done communicating with the client. Then go air your frustrations outside of earshot from anyone who can hear you. If you need to take a second, hey, I need to go for a walk real quick, and then air your grievances to the world.
I think Ray and I were talking about that a couple of weeks ago. Like if you have that kind of interaction with a client, like come to my desk and like yell at me or use me as a sounding board or somebody else, and stay away from that frustration of client. I mean, easier said than done. It's something you get a little better at as you've been around longer. So when you're talking or training your techs, do you have them send an email with every time entry, right? Like treat it almost as an email, or are there some that are just kind of, here's what I did, updated this thing, and that's it? Or is everything just assumed that like closed loop communication with that?
I always have them. So and I would advise anyone else to do this as well. Any technician should not be utilizing email as a method of communication, like Outlook email as a method of communication. Everything should be done inside of a ticket. And if it's not done in a ticket, it doesn't exist because there's no way. I'm not going into your email to find you communicated with someone, right? But every communication you do inside of the ticket, in my opinion, should be phrased as if you're emailing the client.
Right.
Hey, Mr. Client, just want to give you an update on everything we're working on and everything we're doing. Let me know if you have any other problems or questions or issues or whatever. Thanks. And we already have a signature assigned in the tickets, right? So that's my personal opinion on that subject, because you're communicating with a client, and just like you would email, it should be professionally done and have some type of code.
Yeah, I agree too. Like emailing clients directly is just asking for something to get dropped later or something to get lost, or most likely they'll email you something 2 weeks down the road after you're done working on them, especially if it's for a tech, right? Somebody who's not assigned to that account, just working on a rotating help desk kind of ticket. And next thing you know, you have a critical issue sitting in somebody's inbox that you haven't seen for 2 weeks.
Yep. Oh, they take vacation too, and then your PTO or you're sick, and then you don't answer email, and they're like calling and complaining to the account manager, the CEO. Why did I get my stuff resolved? I'm like, would you open a ticket? I emailed so and so.
You let your techs take vacation?
Yes, we do. Our work culture is fantastic. We are hiring.
Nice.
All right. But you ready to go to the next one?
No, we can keep going. If we have more to talk about, let's go.
So there's one more point I'd like to point out, because there's this thing we kind of glossed over, is a level 1 technician.
Yes.
And the issues that are generally given to a level 1 technician don't always need to be super detailed, right? Fix a printer, print queue was broken, password resets, things like that. So as the level of technician you as an individual are increases, the detail of your notes should also increase for specifics, right? If you say, I wouldn't necessarily say I went into the server and restarted printspooler.exe. You should have a general understanding of what you're resolving, right? So you can say, I restarted the print spooler, and those reading your ticket should understand that the print spooler on the server has been restarted, and that fixed it, right? So
no, that's a good point, right? So enough detail that you don't want to confuse the person you're talking with, the end customer. But you do want enough detail that if a tech comes and read it later, they'll have a clue what you did. Especially if they're looking at, hey, somebody had this issue a year ago. Let me see what this person did to resolve it. And, you know, if your notes are like fixed issue, that doesn't help anyone, which
No,
I've seen happen.
so much. Hey, Mr. Client, resolve your problem. Let us know if it happens again. Hey, it happened again. How did I fix that?
Right? We don't even know what the problem was.
Right.
Do you have any tips or any suggestions for techs about how to write better emails and ticket notes? And what I mean by that is we've had techs come in that, like, I'm without trying to like totally throw anyone under the bus, they couldn't write. Like, they had bad communication skills and needed to work on them. How do you address that?
That's a tough one because everyone has bad communication skills. It's not just IT people. Like, it's, and I mean this as someone who works for a mid to large size MSP. From the top down, communication is just horrible from all endpoints. So you're always going to miss information. You're always going to forget what specifics need to be mentioned. So my advice is to constantly work on it and utilize tools that are external that you can, such as ChatGPT. Put in what you like. Take chat. Like a good example is to take what you're going to type to the client. Go, hey, ChatGPT, can you rewrite this in a more professional manner, and then slap it on that, and then it'll spit out. Now, bear in mind, do not input anything PII or IP related into ChatGPT, because it is recording and training itself constantly on anything that's on the free version of ChatGPT. So keep that in mind. Don't do that. But you can take, hey, John, restarted the server and the principal are on the server and everything seems to be up and running. That's probably still kind of professional, but you can take what ChatGPT tells you and what you want to tell the client and learn from that how to do it. You can also look at someone who does it really well and learn what phrasing and wordings they use.
It's so important, right? There's an art to this, and the same message phrased differently is just a completely different outcome and different interaction with the client. It turns something that would have been a negative if said bluntly into at least an understanding and okay kind of conversation.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Well, I was just going to add in that something to always keep in mind, and this isn't just for client communication, but any communication you have via text-based form, how you write it is not how someone will read it. You have to understand that, and you have to use better phrasing. You have to practice at it. It can be difficult to understand where you messed up in certain phrasing, because you can have an upbeat conversation and with negative things, but once you phrase that in text, it seems like you're screaming or yelling at someone, or just bad mouthing them completely, when that's not the same tone, because you can't read tone in text.
Sarcasm doesn't come through.
Sarcasm definitely doesn't come through unless you like highlight it and it's someone you've worked with and known. Like, there's a relationship aspect to that as well, which means your communications with someone you've been working with for years is much less professional, less on point with someone who you never worked with before. You have to make sure that you're not transposing either one of those. You're not assuming a relationship with someone you don't have, and make sure that you use more professional wording. It's hard to say. You can ask ChatGPT; he'll give you a nice explanation.
Yeah. And we saw a comment a minute or two ago that said, be careful what you say to clients, which is a huge point, not only just from a tone perspective, but from a clients, especially if something is going poorly, will hang on every word of this and start dissecting it. And right. So especially if you do something you don't have the authority to do, like promise you're going to give time back or give money back or something like that. Or, right. Or if you make a promise that, hey, this is the absolute fix, it's done, right? And that turns out not to be true, there's a big reputational hit for that. So
Yeah.
so without saying hedge things, but just be careful about setting realistic expectations when you do this, right? It all goes back to expectation setting, like so many other communication things.
Yeah, I'd say never use absolutes in text-based communication. That way you cover yourself for regardless. We should have everything fixed. Let me know if there's any other issues.
Yeah.
I'll always assume it's going to break again, and always assume, and if you don't, like, in going back to the reference of, giving money or discounts or whatever, be like, I'll pass this information on to my supervisor and let them make the decision.
Yeah. Let the account managers deal with that.
Yeah. So it's just never use absolutes, and that will help you in making sure you can set and maintain client expectations.
Agreed. All right. Any other comments on ticket notes? I think we've more or less beaten this one to death. All right. Let's move on.
Oh, I'm blinded again. Hold on. Gotta adjust this from the sunlight.
Right. Get the binoculars out. So we didn't read the responses. That's all right. We'll do it on this one. How do you manage escalations internally? So even the thread title, I think, is a good topic without even getting into the specifics of. Let's just even talk about escalations. Like I assume they're internal. So when you have a tech who's working on or stuck on something, how does he and how is he taught to decide when to send that up to the next tier? What does it look like? What do they do? What's the criteria for I'm stuck on this? Is it time based? Is it a judgment call?
Both. So there has to be some kind of hard limit, right? Us as most technicians really enjoy solving IT related puzzles. So we can get stuck in the weeds of trying to solve some really complex puzzles without the knowledge that some of the higher level technicians have and the experience of that.
Mm-hmm.
When you escalate a ticket from level 1 to the next level, we try to say within 30 minutes you should reach out to your team lead and verify if you need to escalate or move it. So we keep that as a point of having someone to come in and be like, oh, you're close to solving this. You should be, you've made a lot of headway. You can go ahead and finish this up, or this is kind of really outside your wheelhouse. We should move this up the chain. That way we can elevate our internal technicians, and we encourage them to go back and figure out what the actual resolution was so that they can learn. But generally, we at that 30-minute mark, we want them to have someone else come and verify if they should move it or if they should continue on it.
So 30 minutes, or are there certain classes of issues where somebody might get it and immediately escalate, right? We used to do things, if it was obviously a server related issue, level 1 would automatically escalate that to level 2, or if it was a security incident, we'd have that auto escalate to a different team immediately. So when it comes to escalations, though, actually, first comment on that. Looked like you were about to say something.
I don't know that obvious initial escalations are that obvious, right? Because even if it's a server issue, like there's going to be something where it might need to be moved up the chain, like a security incident, like someone's been breached or someone has business email compromise, like that. I can easily see that's not going to be something level 1 could easily shut down, and that gets escalated in a critical emergency situation. But a normal ticket that's not a critical, I don't know that it's going to be super obvious initially that I would be comfortable with them making the judgment consistently. Level 1s are generally really inexperienced and can tend to not be willing to come out of their comfort zones. So that'd be the only hesitation I'd have with them making the judgment of escalations, because we want them to learn and train. And how are they going to do that without solving complex problems? And sometimes you get a simple problem that looks complex, and sometimes you get a complex problem that's actually quite simple. And we want them to learn and educate that. So I don't know that I'd agree that I'd let them objectively without some like list of things or critical ticket assignment. Would be
Yeah,
best way.
something very specific. These are so maybe not the categories, but these are the specific things. If this comes up, it needs to be auto escalated. And I guess it depends on what level your level 1 techs are, right? If they're truly like, level 0.5, or like right out of, this is my first day on my first IT job, that might be a different criteria than someone who's an experienced level 1 tech and has been there a while and just hasn't moved up to level 2 yet. But you segued perfectly into the point I was going to make about the other side of escalations, right? So there was always this battle internally from the senior guys versus the junior guys, and it was always some form of, man, we think that they are escalating too quickly. They haven't Googled the error message. They haven't checked the event logs. Are there any specific technical criteria or technical, you have to Google it first, or you have to check the event logs before you hit that escalate parachute?
Yeah, that's really interesting. I think someone mentioned in the chat that they have a policy that if a tier 2 or tier 3 accepts an escalation from a tier 1, they're responsible for going back and educating them.
I like that.
Yeah, it is. Someone else made a point that why not have the tier 1 tech shadow the tier 2 tech if time permits, and usually time doesn't permit because there's always another ticket on the board that needs to get looked at, and it's really hard to justify right to MSP leadership that it's worth it to spend that extra time in training that technician. Don't get me wrong, I think it's super important for most cases to have them shadow, but the ticket
Not
loads,
as a frequent thing. It's got to be an
yeah.
occasional thing.
But I think there are better methods to educate technicians that you can schedule for, like schedule a training time where you can take the tickets that you escalated and go back and review with a senior technician. I think that would be more beneficial and easier to happen instead of immediately going to shadow that technician, because that technician may not be working on it immediately. They may have something they have to finish up and work on, and it gets scheduled later to work on.
So without trying to open the in-office versus remote Pandora's box here, this was a nice thing about being in the office a few years ago, in that I would occasionally take some time and just kind of walk around to where the support desk guys were and like help them with something right at their desk, as opposed to them handing off the ticket completely. Like, it was a great way to teach them, like stand next to them and say, click on this to do it, as opposed to them just punting off the ticket and it was gone. Is that something that you've been able to replicate, or is that something that you did? And if so, can you still replicate it in the remote world?
I think it's absolutely replicable.
Replicable,
Yeah.
repeatable.
The issue, I mean, it is really nice to be able to just lean over and be like, you should look at this, this, and this, and then go back to my what I'm working on, right? And having them be like, hey, I'm looking at this, and get a quick question and answer back and forth. But it is repeatable in the fact that you can set up a Teams call and do the same exact thing, but you have a video like this, right? We can have a conversation, and I can share my screen to you, and you can share your screen to me, and we can both remote into the same PC 99% of the time, depending on your tool sets, and look at the issue together. So that's an absolute thing you can do. The issue that comes from that is the text-based communication and understanding. It goes back to making sure that you're conveying the problem accurately and correctly to those you're trying to get help with, and that they're available to get help. That's one thing you have to keep in mind if you do have that, is making sure that they are at a point to where they can help you and assist you, and you're not constantly going to them. As a technician, as someone who's newer, make sure not to pick someone out. Spread your questions. give you different perspectives for one, but it also makes sure that you don't annoy someone with your questions, just out of them having to constantly teach you, right? Their role as a leader in the in whatever company you have as their higher level than you is to help, but at some point they still have to do their own day job, that they're paid to do, that their primary job to close tickets and whatnot. So just keep that in mind as you're asking questions, and give detailed questions. This is the issue. This is what I have discovered. These are the steps I have done. What would you recommend I do next?
Yes.
Include as much information as possible, because they're going to be like, have you looked at this, this, and this? And if you've already done that, you've now just wasted roughly 15 minutes of both of your times and just typing back and forth. And because generally that's how it starts. So keep that in mind.
But that's a super good point, though. Like, as a senior tech, it's worth your time to spend some time investing in the junior guys, right? Spending time doing joint troubleshooting, and really resist the urge to be an answer vending machine. Like, it does not help you or help them to say, yeah, do this by clicking on this or typing in this command. It helps more to, hey, you should check out this PowerShell command, and that's your answer somewhere in there, as opposed to just sending them a Teams note with the entire syntax figured out. Now, it depends on what it is, right? Sometimes it's so time sensitive you can't do that, but I think at least it's worth your time as a senior investing in these guys and spending some time teaching them and teaching them how you come up with these things, not just showing them the answer all the time. I really struggled with that. Like, I was an answer vending machine for a long time, and like to the point where our company owner said, stop bothering Matt. He's not getting any other work done. So I don't know. I think it's useful. And if you're a junior, just don't take advantage of that.
Yeah. Another issue that I've seen in MSPs is they don't invest internally to their technicians. And that's also a problem that has to be resolved. You can't expect someone to immediately be level 2 just because you hired them at level 1, right? There is training and work on both sides to get to that point. And you should absolutely invest in your technicians to make them better, regardless of what method you choose to invest in them. But to going back to escalations in general, this question specifically says level 1 directly escalates to level 3. And I would highly disagree with that method. There are, again, it goes back to specific situations where that would be allowed, but 90% of the time it goes up the next level, which would be level 2. However, they don't have level 2. According to that post, they have let everyone. Oh, look, see, look, producing team is just doing great. We're back to non-blinding,
back to dark mode.
Yeah, but they don't have level 2s. Evidently, they have either promoted all of their level 2s or they've moved on and they haven't replaced them. But level 2s are where you solve most of your issues. Level 1 and level 2, there should be like it's a funnel, right? Most of your issues are solved by level 1, and then even more are solved by level 2, and level 3 gets few, but they take longer to resolve, right?
Yes.
That's the general consensus of how you want to schedule them, but you want to make sure that you have that middle level to solve those problems.
Did you have a beyond level 3? Like, the way we did it is, if the initial escalations, like the managed services team, got stuck, then it would hit the projects team. Is
That's
the higher
the same
engineers
thing we
were usually
have,
there?
pretty much.
Same thing.
Yeah, we have level 1, 2, 3, and then we have our projects team, and then we have our wearer of many hats, who does literally everything.
Yeah.
And that's the final. If he can't fix it, we're opening maybe it's a Microsoft issue. We have to talk. I don't like it. There's something like critically wrong if he can't fix the problem at that point. And there's only one of him, so we want to make sure that we measure his time wisely. But we have such a what we call our quick fix team, who's generally does most of the quick simple things. if it's not something that we immediately know it's simple, like a password reset or adding a printer or new user creation, stuff like that, then it goes to level 1, and then they escalate it to 2 and 3, and then it goes to our projects team.
Yeah. And I think many people watching this are probably that last resort guy. Like, it was the escalation path from here is Microsoft. I was, suspect you are, Kyle, or at least
Uh,
have been.
No, actually, not for
No?
technical related things. My technical ability is atrophied. I am more in the business side of the MSP than technical. I can still troubleshoot, but it's going to take me a lot longer to get through a situation than some of the people who constantly do it. But no, it is not me. There are areas of expertise where I am that person, but it's not generally related. Like, it's like I'm in charge of our PSA. So if something happens with
Yeah.
our PSA, then they come to me or stuff like that. But generally speaking, I'm not the technical person.
This is such a good point. Like, it's totally outside the question, but the reality of techs who want to get promoted to management as a next step, the realization that it's a totally different job and that your technical skills will diminish. Like, when I took over projects, I stopped being that guy because I wasn't doing tech all day anymore, right? And you have to know what you're getting into when you do that. It's not just you get to still be rock star engineer and get paid more. It's you have a totally different job, and it's going to suck in the beginning while you learn how to be a business person and manager.
Yep. You got to worry about what money goes into what bucket and what process is being run, and if the process is inefficient, how to improve that process, and where's communication happening, making sure the communication is happening. Like, it's the skill sets you had start developing are much different than similar puzzle solving in some areas, but generally speaking, it's more to do with conversations and meetings and communication and document writing than opening up a server and installing it and throwing in VMware or Hyper-V and configuring all the cool stuff that you used to be able to do.
When I started doing that, I was like, can I take a break for a minute and go fix something? It'd be like a vacation.
Yeah. I don't get to do that much anymore, but I like start doing mini dev projects on the weekends because I really enjoy programming for some reason. And so I like the other weekend, I actually wrote an app for the first time in like a year. Made a lot of progress on it. It was really nice. Felt really good. So for those
Nice.
who
Very
not
cool.
doing it, I encourage you to do your hobbies again that you used to do back in the day.
Pearl coming up. All right. So I think we can move on from escalations. And Kyle, this story has you written all over it. I know this is one of your big things. But so a later story has more. So the immediate question, I answered this, by the way, in a thread. So you can all make fun of my response. Do you deal with the outgoing MSP or does the client?
This
Oh,
is
thanks, Simon, pulling mine up for the world to see.
this is a pretty simple answer,
Yeah.
in my opinion. It depends. The first question you should ask is, what does the client want? The client wants to deal with the handling of the situation. Tell them the information that you need and have them get it. The second option is sometimes the client may have to deal with them. Either they're not telling the MSP that they're leaving. There's all kinds of weird situations involving stuff like that. So you want to be careful with those as well. And then if the client gives you permissions, you work with the MSP. Now, don't get your hopes up on how helpful that MSP will be. It could be a number of different things of why the client is leaving. Sometimes the MSP will hand you a bucket of documentation and you'll be like, yay. Sometimes you might get one password and it doesn't work. So just manage your expectations accordingly. But generally speaking, it's up to the client and how they want to deal with the situation.
And so I would say the client always needs to at least make the first contact, right?
Yeah.
I mean,
There should be an
otherwise
intro
it's just,
email for sure.
yeah, it's
Or
just
some
you
type of that.
randomly reaching out to an MSP saying, give me all that client's credentials and documentation. What I wrote in the thread, and I'll repeat it here, is that after a while, you start to develop a working relationship with the other MSPs in your area, and it's worthwhile to stay friendly with them, at least cooperative. And if it's one of those, you usually get the client will give the notification, and then the people you've worked with in the past will just kind of work with you again. Like the client still gets copied on the emails, but you feel more confident in excuse me, in directly interacting with the MSP in that case, as opposed to having the client need to be the conduit for everything.
Yeah. There's also to expand on that point, if you are the outgoing MSP in this case, do your best to give everything you can to the new individual. Make that offboarding as a smooth and simple as process as you can make it, because that's going to be what ends up being in the client's mind, and it also is what the other MSP is going to judge you on. And it's, we're people, like, don't judge, don't, be all that stuff. But people are going to judge, people are going to make assumptions, and that interaction, you get the first 30 seconds, you have to make an impression, right? And this is your 30 seconds. So do your best to make sure that offboarding is smooth as possible, and be helpful without, breaking policy or process, and or upsetting the client in any way. So just be mindful of that.
In most cities, it won't be too long before a client's going in the other direction, and they're going to remember that if you were a jerk to them or if you were nice to them.
Yeah, and also if it'll make the new MSP think the client was a bad one because you're being all helpful, giving all the documentation you have.
Yeah, please.
They'd be like,
please
why are they going
guys
away then? That's suspicious. That's
well, you ever
fun.
get that? Like, I know occasionally I would have a private like phone call or something with the outgoing MSP, and they'd say, yeah, by the way, these guys never paid their bill, or they've churned through every org in the city, or one of those guys. Are like, awesome, thanks for the warning.
Yeah. I mean, it's a situation, and sometimes sometimes the situation isn't as black and white as it may appear to be. Even if the old MSP says they're a horrible client or they're a great client, there's a lot of context that's missing from those general statements too.
There are some, the classic, this is your fourth provider in the last 2 years kind of deal. Those ones are the red flags.
That's if they tell you that they're your fourth provider.
Right.
That's all I have on that one. That was a pretty simple
one.
Okay.
Yeah, let's keep going. I think we have a more interesting onboarding story next.
Oh. Ooh.
Part of your SLAs, do you have a clear standard process for clients for onboarding and offboarding?
So this is like a merged question, because SLAs.
I read that as like procedures. And
that's what I'm saying. But SLA makes it sound like, do you have different times for when you're allowed, like when you can answer an offboarding question or something? But I'm actually in the process of rebuilding our entire onboarding system at my MSP, and the answer is yes, you should have one, and you should follow it. Not everyone will, and you won't be able to follow it to a T to every client. But you should have a standard onboarding and a standard offboarding, mainly for consistency reasons. You'd be surprised on how much information and data you have to collect, and it's all within a very short period of time. And it's very, very difficult to remember every bit of information you need to properly support a client, and not having to go back and be like, well, I need this too, or well, I need this as well, and can you get me this? Because
it's impossible.
And that's going to upset the client, make it feel like you're not prepared, and set the relationship already on a rocky start. And that is the absolute, again, back to first impressions, right? This is the first impression of your services. And you want to make sure that there's some type of system in place to be as consistent with it as possible. Yeah.
When you're going through that, especially if you've not done a lot of onboardings before, you have this huge form, or at least we did, and it must have been 100 questions, and it's kind of awkward the first time. You feel like you're interrogating the client, asking them question after question after question, and some of these you can discern yourself, right, by looking at the network, but many of them are, who's your internet provider? What's the account number so that you can call into support? Are you an authorized on the VoIP provider? Like all that stuff. And just get through it. Like just the client gets it. They know they're changing IT providers, and they will appreciate that you're trying to be that thorough and just get it all out of the way at the first meeting.
Yeah, and set the expectation. Have your sales staff set the proper expectations for the onboarding process, and do not underutilize your sales team for collecting some of the information that will help you in the onboarding process. Right?
Mm-hmm.
There's things that they collect in order to make a quote proposal for the potential person, client, and prospect. That's the word I was looking for the prospect, and that is almost invaluable for you to help plan and schedule and the situation of onboarding itself, because it also depends on who's doing the onboarding. Sometimes there's a team, sometimes it's one person. Just really depends on a ton of different things, but that it's going to help you where you need to go and spend your time. And when you do ask those questions, don't be afraid to prepare the client ahead of time that you're going to ask them a bunch of questions. And if you need to break it up into different sections, schedule multiple meetings. Break it down by type of question, like policy procedure questions, business questions, hardware questions, networking questions. And it does a lot of good when you're badgering the client in that way. It may seem frustrating initially, but you're trying to understand their business in a way that you can support them and help them grow and utilize technology much more efficiently in according to their vertical. And you want to understand what they do, how they do it, and what makes them unique. And understanding that, as well as understanding where they're currently at as far as the technical layout goes, are critical to making sure that you have a long-lasting partnership and you have zero turnover.
Yeah, that's a critical point that a lot of companies miss. That all the stuff that you can find yourself, like is there a battery backup on the server and what kind of firewall? Like you go look at all that stuff and don't bother asking your primary contact about that. Focus more on the what's your after hours look like, what's the impact of this system to your business? If it goes down, what kind of state are you in? Like ask those kind of questions for two reasons. One, it's genuinely useful information, and two, your competitors probably aren't asking that. It's a nice way to stand out about helping them and showing that you care about them as an outcome for their business, not just here to turn the wrenches and fix the tech.
Yeah, you're not collecting a paycheck and hoping they don't open any tickets, right? That's like the standard MO for a lot of MSPs. But once you start working towards building that partnership and that relationship with the client, when you do have issues in the future, because you will, we're all human, right? Something's going to happen. They're not going to get what they want exactly. You're not going to get, you may slip up and not provide the best service. This will help you to make sure that you started on the foot that allows you to make up from bad situations. Right.
Yeah.
If you have that good relationship and you accidentally delete their entire critical data server and it takes you a week to get back, they're going to be like, you know what, we appreciate, you giving us credit for the time. We appreciate everything you've done. They may still leave you for something that critical, but it's going to make it the chance of that happening is much lower because you're embedded yourself into them to make sure that you are actually their IT department and not someone that they pay for services.
Yeah, it's the accrued relationship capital, right? And it forgives quite a bit of mistakes, just being honest about them. There is, though, a strategic aspect when you're going through these questions, right? Like, I don't know about you. I would sometimes ask questions that I could discern from looking around just to show the client that we're thinking about this
Hmm.
kind of thing. Um, like a perfect example might be backup strategies, right? I would ask them about it, even though I knew perfectly well they were using backup exec and it would be a complete disaster. But you would ask something like, um, the last time you did a test restore, how did that go?
Yep.
It's the kind of thing that takes a little bit of experience to know when it's appropriate to drop those, but it's really helpful if you can get them in the right spot.
Oh yeah. It also, asking questions that you already know the answer to also helps you gauge their level of expertise and their value in technology as well, which is super important. Because if they don't have a lot of technical know-how or understanding, and you can absolutely know tech without actually understanding it. So keep that in mind too. Um, if you are going through that situation and you can see that, you can understand, and they don't have that super depth of knowledge, but they also don't value technology, that's going to be a problem because they're not going to trust you in anything you recommend that may be beneficial. And they're also going to not, they're going to be much more upset when technology breaks, um, because it will break, right? Um,
Yes.
so
And do you value technology is something that ideally you can find out pre-sale, right? Before
you
you even
should
get
find
to
out
the
pre-sale.
onboarding
Yes.
meeting, you should know that,
Yes.
hopefully.
Uh, yeah. And if you're not getting that, you also have to be careful you're talking to in the sales process, right? Because the CEO may not be the person you're dealing with.
Yeah.
So you want to know the stakeholders and you want to know who's going to be your primary contact. And then you want to ask them those pointed questions, because the CEO's, right, he's going to be the one that signs the checks and okays everything at the end of it, but he's not going to be the one who's understanding of situations, right? So you always want to be mindful of who the stakeholders are and who you're actually working with on a daily basis.
Yeah. Agreed. Um, so rereading that post, I think the poster was actually asking about user onboarding. Um,
Oh,
I think. Do you use that, or did you ever have fill out a form with they need access to this stuff? This is what department they're in, or was it informal? They would send in like, here's their title, here's their manager, make them look like Sally in terms of access.
um, that is a very not clear post, for sure. Um, so we use Halo PSA is our PSA system, and it has the ability to build forms inside of the client portal.
Mhm.
So we have generic forms for 90% of our clients and customized forms for the other 10%. And they fill out those forms requesting whatever they need to request, and that gets handled. It gets all routed magically in the back end to where it needs to go to be able to dealt with. But we have a form for onboarding and offboarding, because again, it goes back to being able to consistently do the same process over and over again, in a way that you want to make sure that you're doing everything that needs to be done with that. For example, if you're doing a new user, what groups do they need to be added to? They need to be added to distribution groups. Do they need to be set up? Are they going to get a license to this? Like, there's stuff that you might know in the back of your mind, but you're just going to do a ticket, right? You're not going to remember that. And you may call the client and ask, but the client's also not going to remember, which is the most important factor.
Which is better than set them up like Sally user, because you might not remember that that person has a license to InDesign or something,
Mhm.
and so have them list out everything they actually need as opposed to clone this person.
Yep. And in my experience, even if you have systems and if something in place and a client emails in, says, "Hey, I need a new user created. They start tomorrow." Or they it's 8 o'clock. They
That
start
never
at 9,
happens.
and like they're going to forget things as well.
Yeah.
So it's and they're going to blame you, not themselves, for them not being set up properly. So having a form for both sides to have the clear set expectations, it's much easier to go, well, you didn't fill out the form correctly and we need that form because it tells us what needs to be installed and set up. And that's what your account manager should do. And please technicians don't do that. But it's important to do that. So make sure to have forms and stuff so that they're correct.
So you raise a good point though about the new hire. It is super tempting when making forms like this to do things like set the minimum date you can pick to 1 week from now for the start date. Like just don't do that. You're just going to annoy everyone.
They're just going to call in and not going to fill out the form,
right?
Or send an email in.
Tempting as it is, and it is, but all you're doing is making friction.
Yeah, and they're going to ignore it. They'll set a date either in the future and then call you like, why isn't this done? I need them to start tomorrow. And then you'll have to change the date anyway, or they'll just email and call in without filling out the form. It's not going to do anything but cause problems. So, but also for those who are in the know, there's RPA platforms that exist, which you can utilize to automate a ton of this without you having to do anything. There's a few out there in the world. I'm not going to name any vendors, but you can, Google it. And there are people who have set up forms that people fill out, and it will go out, create them in Azure, copy the profile that they've selected or that the client has selected, set up licensing that they've required, and build a new PC that they may have in stock and connected. There's a ton of stuff you can do with those systems nowadays that is really cool. And all it does is just add it to the ticket, and then boom, they don't do anything. So
yeah, automation makes it consistent and less work for techs. Yeah. Okay. I think that's about it for this episode.
Yeah.
Any last words you want to leave us with, Kyle? And thanks for filling in for Ray.
Sure. For those building processes or doing processes, you should always be evaluating your processes to see where they're inefficient and see if you can make them better, because your system, software, and clients are constantly changing. So should your processes.
Man, I can't top that. We'll leave it at that. So thanks for coming. Thanks for watching us, and we will be back to our regular cadence next week.
Bye.
This has been a broadcast of the MSP Media Network.